Anheuser-Busch plans to buy back cans of expired Bud Light beer from wholesalers after experiencing a drop in sales in the wake of the brand's partnership with transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney. This is according to new reporting in the Wall Street Journal. Apparently, the beer giant is looking to make amends with alienated customers, good luck with that, as Bud Light sales have failed to recover from conservatives' boycott.
In its bid to win back customers, the company will reportedly have Bud Light sponsor a veterans group for the first time, interestingly for the first time, and is planning to promote the beer in commercials that will play heavily on themes like football and country music, according to the Journal. Ted Cruz weighed in on the GOP's place in stoking the culture war as we head into the 2024 campaign cycle. Let's watch.
As Republicans prepare for 2024's presidential campaign, the fact that one cannot win a GOP primary without titillating culture war addicts is undermining the party's prospects for winning the next general election. Reuters has been reporting that GOP mega donor Peter Thiel doesn't want to get financially involved this time around because he's worried about focusing on things like transgenderism, on abortion. What do you make about these warnings that you're going to alienate big donors and potentially voters by focusing on these issues?
Listen, I think, number one, the Democrat Party on issues of culture has gone really extreme. This is a party that embraces medical transitions, sex changes for children, 8, 9, 10-year-old children, medical surgeries, sterilizing kids, removing perfectly healthy body parts. I got to say, I think that is extreme. I think that's child abuse.
Well, you know, he makes an interesting point because when we were younger, the beer that kids drank, the beer that was marketed to kids,
trans,
would make them straighter, less LGBTQIA.
Yeah. So
it's absurd.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So there's a lot here. So
sure.
I think Ted Cruz is right. I don't know so much the Democratic Party as it is the Democratic Party. People who are associated with the Democratic Party, student activists, TikTok influencers, I don't know, academics, far left city council members in Portland or something. Those people are much farther left on transgender issues and some other cultural issues. Most people, even a lot of people who are Democrats otherwise, are more to the right than the most far left liberal people on trans issues, specifically with sports teams, right? I don't think people care so much about bathrooms anymore. The bathroom isn't like some sacred experience. I don't know.
Well, if Fox News is allowing trans people to use the gender of their choosing, then it's a whole new world.
The war is lost, truly. So I agree that there's overreach in both directions. But what I think the thrust of this question was, and it's accurate, you know, there's caring about wokeness going too far and like making fun of it. And in fact, the backlash against Bud Light it's not been a government, it's not been a Republican political maneuver. It's been conservatives. It's voluntary. It's just people rejecting this product based on that's what's fine.
Well, but there are a lot of not just conservative people in the public, in the media, but conservative politicians who have actively encouraged the Bud Light boycott.
Sure, fine. But it's different than, for instance, DeSantis has actually gone with, you know, a legal battle with the Disney Corporation that impugns some freedom of speech values, and I think it's that kind of thing that is turning off Peter Thiel as a donor, will be harder to sell in a general election. There's making fun of wokeness, which is, I think, a popular thing to do because wokeness is not, it's true, is not beloved by the general public as it is by like DEI consultants and, you know, some people on Twitter. However, it doesn't always have an obvious policy component, and Republicans have tried to search for one because they sense that that's where they can succeed, is because everybody's annoyed by this. But then what do you actually do? And then it seems like you're obsessed with it, and then it's violating freedom of speech.
Let's take just 1 second to remember what we're describing as wokeness. Amid the dozens, hundreds of advertisements from Bud Light that are about Clydesdales and cars and women on the beach and kids drinking at parties and football games, there was one choice to get a sponsor who was trans who sat on TikTok and drank a can of beer. It is woke. What we're describing as wokeness is a woman who happens to be trans drinking beer and getting paid by by Bud Light to do that. This is in addition to all their other ads, which have kept being ads, which are the typical types of God and country ads that they've been doing since time immemorial. They chose to try to broaden their market share by appealing to a community that's under-targeted one time, and that's been characterized. That's what wokeness got amok is. If that's people's position, that's people's position. But I think it's worth noting that over half, we talked about this poll I think last week, over half of registered voters say political attacks on trans kids' families are a major problem. So to the extent that there is a feeling that making fun of wokeness is popular, it abuts the reality that there are literally hundreds of laws being promulgated across the country, some of which are failing, some of which are passing, which are targeting not just children, but inclusive of children, families with trans children, their right to make decisions about the health care of their own child personally in their household, but also which constrain the ability of adults to dress the way they like, to live their lives the way they like, to take the medical paths that they would like to take. So much so that Marjorie Taylor Greene's husband recently got into some hot water because he's on camera doing like a joke TV segment some years ago in drag and in an act that would be prohibited by some of the laws that some Republicans are trying to pass across the country. And people are pointing out that this is exactly why people are concerned. The laws are so broad. Some of these laws are so overreaching that they would preclude Rudy Giuliani from very famously dressing up in drag and making jokes with Donald Trump.
Well, right.
Marjorie Taylor Greene's husband from dressing in drag. George Santos from dressing in drag.
I find a lot of the lumping in drag stuff with the broader transgender issue that Republicans have been doing in some of this legislation to be very confused and actually unhelpful because they're very different things. Men dressing up in women's costumes has a long history. It was part of the military. It's been in like all male spaces because it's funny and entertaining because men and women are different. And men putting on the costume of woman doesn't magically transform you into a woman. In fact, it's very easy to tell and obvious that this is not someone who was intended to be a woman.
I don't know about
which almost
obvious.
Is opposite.
We're not watching the same drag shows.
But that is actually what I'm saying is, on some level, is 100% philosophically different from what's going on with the trans issue, which is claiming that you can alter aspects of your appearance and then actually change your underlying gender sexual dynamic.
No, it's
which
changing,
is the opposite of drag.
It's having a different identity. Trans people aren't claiming to be cis people. That's why we have words like trans and cis, but they are claiming a different gender identity than the one they are assigned at birth.
Right.
And that is...
Which is not what you're doing in drag. You're wearing a costume.
Right. But both, to different degrees, by different laws, are being prohibited. And I think that when you have the effect of, what was it, one of these Western states where this law went into effect and they realized that it literally pertained to one 10-year-old girl in the whole state. And when they realized that they had gone through all of this energy to basically prevent one 10-year-old girl in the state from playing on the soccer team of her choice, they were like, actually, this is not the kind of community we want to be, and backtracked it. And so I do think that this movement has sowed the seeds of its own destruction. Bud Light's taking a hit. We'll see what happens. We'll see if they try to... They said they're going to do more car ads or whatever, football, typical types of beer ads to try to get back the market share. Do we want to live in a world where companies are maybe even moving in an actively transphobic direction in order to try to get market share?
I think some people just want it to be non-political.
Is it political to have mixed race people, mixed race couples in ads? There was a whole news cycle a few years ago where people were very upset about that. There's too many biracial people in Cheerios ads.
Underestimating the extent to which Dylan Mulvaney in particular is a political activist and
is she?
To some people an obnoxious one.
Is she a political activist?
And that there is blowback to that.
Or is she a trans person who talks about her transition on TikTok? A free country?
Well, it is a free country, and that she is welcome to do that, and people are welcome to respond to it as they have.
Yeah.
They have responded to it by wholly rejecting the product she was selling or representing.
Some people have responded by choosing to be, I gotta say, more invested in owning the libs than obviously drinking the beer of their choosing, which is that they've historically chosen and liked, and they can continue to do that. And I'm sure Anheuser-Busch, a huge beer alcohol monopoly, a pseudo monopoly in this country, will do just fine. Many people are boycotting Bud Light to buy other Anheuser-Busch products. In fact, an early angle of the story was that an alcohol that people were, a beer that people were advocating in the alternative was in fact endorsed by Caitlyn Jenner, another trans woman. So there's a lot of inconsistency.
One that there has not been a lot of blowback to because...
Well, no, there is. In fact, we don't have enough time to really get into this, but Matt Walsh and Caitlyn Jenner ended up in a Twitter fight last week, precisely because Caitlyn Jenner was making representations about how Republicans, here we have the tweet up on the screen, aren't actually against transness. They don't say that trans isn't real. That is not the GOP. The GOP and MAGA are a big tent party. This is what Caitlyn Jenner is saying. And Matt Walsh says, nope, your position is completely unintelligible. You assert the validity of transgenderism. You claim that you are a woman. You accepted the Woman of the Year award, and you declare that trans women in women's sports are actually men and don't belong there. Total incoherence. Now, I don't agree with Matt Walsh's position. I do agree that Caitlyn Jenner's position is incoherent and that she's trying to have it both ways, being both within the GOP and a proud trans woman.
I mean, I don't know. She's saying that, based on what I'm reading that tweet, she sounds like she's taking the position that we should be broadly accepting of trans people. Trans women are women, but it's not appropriate for them to be in all the same spaces as cis women, including sports. And there are questions about when to engage in these interventions for children. And that seems broadly representative among where the country's at. I think most of the country is there.
Saying. Matt Walsh is saying that at the same time she's making arguments about trans women shouldn't be in cis women's spaces, taking cis women's awards, taking cis women's spot on teams. Caitlyn Jenner herself has been very happy to do exactly that, getting exactly those kinds of awards and accolades from liberals up until this point. So he is right that she is being deeply hypocritical about this. She thinks that there's one standard for her and a different standard for other kinds of trans people. Matt Walsh is correct about that. I think that you can't, if Caitlyn Jenner said,
there's a different standard for kids?
No, that is not what she's saying. I mean, that's just not what she's saying. And that's not what Matt Walsh is pointing out. You can't sit here and say it's okay. The GOP says it's okay to be trans. Trans people are included. We're a big tent party when it's Republicans across this country, literally hundreds of laws promulgating saying exactly the opposite. And I'm sorry, Matt Walsh is right.
At kids.
No, not at kids. We just had a whole conversation about the anti-drag laws. There are a lot of laws, and people keep trying to act like this is a kids-only issue. It's not. This is a fundamental civil liberties issue that is affecting adults all around this country. Access to different kinds of healthcare. Barriers are being erected. It is not just about kids, but they want to start there. They want to act.
The vast majority of the laws I've seen target kids in these at the medical intervention.
It's not. I'm sorry. It's just not.
You don't agree that they're mostly aimed at underage people?
No.
If we're talking the medical interventions and what bars they can be at, whether there's drag?
No. I don't. I do not agree that most of the anti-trans legislation that's coming down the pipe.
All right. Well, that's an empirical question. Maybe we can do another segment on that and what's.
And also, regardless, that's just not what Caitlyn Jenner is talking about here. And that's Matt Walsh's critique is that Caitlyn Jenner's behavior as a very adult woman in her 70s is hypocritical because she is accepting certain kind of accolades for her own life and entering into quote-unquote women's spaces by accepting the Women of the Year award happily, at the same time that she's arguing that, well, I think that trans women shouldn't be in cis women's spaces, and I'm in line with that GOP position. That's the inconsistency that's being pointed out there by Walsh. And I think he's correct about the inconsistency.
I don't think this is necessarily an inconsistency, but you tell us what you think in the comments, and we'll have more Rising right after this.